But then I'm back. Good luck. Okay, let's begin. Kum Lenen Ablak Gemara. Today's daf is daf Samach from an Aleph. We are all up to the same place, which is about 7 lines from the top of the page. Sholchulei. So we learned all about we learned about different things of Darkei Sholem, things that were incorporated in order to establish Sholem. There shouldn't be any Machlekesen, like a Kohen Levi Yisrael. Just as a brief thing, there's a big argument amongst the poskim, which is the best aliyah to have. So you always hear shlishi. There are many who say shishi. Shishi is the best aliyah, or shlishi at least is equal to shlishi, because every set of 3, shishi starts the next set. There are those who say that shishi is the most, that Isal says shishi is the most important one, because in the spheres, like spheres ha'ima, you say the spheres, Yisoid is shishi, and Yisoid is what establishes and connects all the higher levels and the lower levels. So shishi is the best aliyah. The Lavush says, and actually some others, that the best aliyah to have is shvi, because Mailin bekodesh ve'ein meridin, and also because hakol holich achar chit, we go after the end, which therefore then if you have Hisafis, those who say that the last aliyah, the last Hisafa is the most important aliyah, because Mailin bekodesh ve'ein meridin. And then there's another opinion that actually Haftarah is the most important aliyah, because you read the Torah and you do an Haftarah. On the other hand, you're not moitzi anybody, you're not from the 7 Kruyim. But the advantage of Haftarah is that you make all those brachas. You make 7 brachas total, which is equal to all the 7 aliyahs together. That's why we make 7 brachas, the 2 brachas on the Torah and then 5 on Haftarah. So and technically a Haftarah should be 21 psukim and longer, equal to the 7 aliyahs. That's why some say Haftarah. And
does anyone say Hagba?
Sorry?
Does anyone say Hagba?
What's Hapa?
Hagba.
Hagba. Yes. The last line in the Gemara Megillah. The Gemara says Hagba Keneged Kulam. But the way they did Hagba then was like they do in Lubavitch today, which is one of those Hagba does Galil as well. You put the Sefer Torah back on the Amud and then you roll it up. So the person of Hagba does 2 things, right? Hagba and Galila. In the Nusach Ashkenaz, you do Hagba and somebody else comes along and does Galila. When the Gemara says that Hagba Keneged Kulam, that's the most chashuva thing, was talking about because you do both. You do the Hagba and the Galila. But it sounds a little from the Gemara that not only are you rolling it up, but you're also tying it as well. More than just what you do in Lubavitch. But yeah. So everyone is chashuv, but I haven't seen anyone say that Revi is the most chashuv. So anyway, or Chamishi. Let's continue the Gemara. So the people of Galil sent to Rab Chelboy a following question. Everything was written on a scroll then. What happens? You don't have the entire Sefer Torah, you only have a chumash. It's called chumash because it's a fifth, right? There are 5 chumashim, 5 fifths. So you only have 1 chumash in a scroll. Can you use that? And you have to read Matas and Masay, so you have the entire Bamidbar on 1 scroll. Can you read that in a shul? Lahava b'yadi, didn't know. Also Shai B'chanafchi, asked B'chanafchi, Lahava b'yadi, he also didn't know. Also Shai B'medrash, they went and asked the base of Medrash, Pashtu and Maha, and they tried to resolve it from the following. Rab Shmuel ben Achmeni, Rab Yechon. Rab Shmuel ben Achmeni said, name Rab Yechon. Sefer Torah, Shechasad Yiriyah Achas, if a Sefer Torah is missing 1 of the columns, then ain't koiniba, you don't read from it. So what do we see from it? If a Sefer Torah is missing a column, you don't read from it. And here, you're missing 4 chamashim. So of course you cannot read from it. Second, what are you talking about? The law is not right. Hasam mechsed bin milsei. Over there in the Sefer Torah, it's supposed to be a full Sefer Torah, and you're missing a page. It's possible. Here it's only a chumash. It's not claiming to be any more than a chumash. And as far as the chumash is concerned, it is shalom. It's whole. So therefore, it's like derech mashal. You have a small little bilkala for lechem mishnah, and you have a huge challah, but only half of it. And that half is 10 times the size of the bilkala. Of course, you make that hamaitzi on the shleima. Doesn't matter the size, but it's the shleima. Here also, the chumash at least is shleima. Now, what's interesting here, the Gemara clearly says a Sefer Torah that's missing 1 yiriyah. So what about if it's missing 1 word, 1 letter? It sounds like from here, Hans and Kasha. Only a Sefer Torah is possible if it's missing an entire area. So, all the Rishonim already say it doesn't matter if it's missing a Yeri or even a word. We're using Yeri as an example, but doesn't matter. However, there are some Rishonim who hold that if it's missing words, the very first page, the first column, or the very last column, it is still kosher. It's only if it's missing the entire Yeri. The rest of the Sefer Torah, if it's missing a letter or a word, it's possible. There's a big machlek in the poskim if you can actually make a bracha and read in a shul on a Apostle Sefer Torah. The Rambam says clearly you're allowed to make a bracha on a Apostle Sefer Torah, and the Rajba and other Rishonim hold you're not allowed to make a bracha on a Apostle Sefer Torah, but the Rajba does say, and some other Rishonim, that if there's a psul in Sefer Torah, but not in the Chumash that you are reading. So, for example, the psul is in Shmos, and we're reading Bamidbar. He says you're allowed to read that in a shul, because it says here that even a chumash you could technically read only because of covered hatzibur. We don't want you over here. You have a full Sefer Torah. And why is it covered hatzibur? As we'll see in a minute, because it looks like the community cannot afford a proper Sefer Torah. So if you have a full Sefer Torah, which means you could afford a Sefer Torah, and there's a psul in chumash, then why shouldn't you be able to read Bamidbar? That's what other poskim hold. But the Rambam clearly holds you can make a bracha and read from Apostle Sefer Torah, which is quite interesting. Anyway, let's continue Gemara. Rabbi Yisrael, they both say, "Ain't kaidin b'chamash b'ezknes." We don't want you to read the chumash in a shul, but you covered hatzibur, because covered hatzibur. Then the Gemara says, "Rabbi Yisrael, that Rabbi and Rabbi Yisrael, the Amitavai, they both say, Hai Sefer Haftarah." This Sefer of Haftarah. Also, they used to have a sefer where you have just a Haftarah, so it wasn't the full Tanakh of Shmuel or whatever it is, it's just a Haftarah for that week. So he says here that this sefer of Haftarah is also lemikre be Shabbos. You cannot use a Shabbos in a shul, because the Haftarahs came in after the decree. Some say from Aspasianas that you couldn't read the Kriyas Haftarah on Shabbos, so they devised this new system of reading Haftarahs, which the theme of the Haftarah is similar to what the parsha was. They say you're not allowed to read from Haftarahs if it's just Haftarahs. My time of why? Because we're not allowed to write less than a full Tanakh, a full, let's say, full Malachim, full Shmuel, full Yeshaya. You cannot read any less than that. Mar Barabashi goes a step further. Now that you cannot read it, you're not allowed to even move it around the Shabbos. My time with the Chazal Mikrobeh, you cannot read from it. So it's muktzah. However, you might conclude Veloyi, they're both not right. Shari litatuli, it's not muktzah, you're allowed to move it. Vishari lemikrobeh, you're clearly allowed to read from Haftarahs.
So that's why we read from a chumash, basically a sefer that only has Haftarahs in it.
So there's a big thing there. There's a Vilna Gaon who paskins that you have to use a Megillah, which is a scroll. And there are some shuls that actually use a Megillah that's a scroll. It's fine as well. The Shulchan says that no, and Ram and others say that you don't have to use a scroll, because Eis Lasses La Hashem Heferet Tersecha, you're allowed to use these things. You're allowed to use even a printed thing and so on. But the Magen Avraham says you should not use a sefer of Haftarahs. You must use a proper Malachim, a proper Shmuel, a proper Yeshaya. That's Magen Avraham paskins. And amazing is that the Mishnah Berurah paskins the same way. The Mishnah Berurah in Shulchan clearly paskins that what we're all doing is wrong. You're not allowed to use a sefer of Haftarahs. It's the Alter Rebbe who paskins that what all the shuls do today. Everyone relies on the Alter Rebbe who says you're allowed to use a book of Haftarahs, and the reason is Alter Rebbe says the same Eis Lasses Lashem Efer Tersecha, we'll see in a minute, to do what Hashem's bidding, you're allowed to sometimes deviate from the law, includes not only that we're not reading, the whole Tanakh from a scroll, that we're reading from a printed Shmuel or printed Yeshaya, but for the same token, you can also have a book of just Haftarahs itself, and that's what we all rely on. But the Mishnah Berurah clearly comes out. You can look it up. It's at Reish Pei Daled, the first Mishnah Berurah there. You can read it. It's very interesting. He's totally against what we do today. And interesting, most people don't listen to that. Okay, so what's the story? On Shabbos, they wouldn't learn, halach, whatever. They would learn Haggadah, which is like, now we have a rule, as we'll see in the Gemara soon, that anything which is said orally, you're not allowed to write it down. Till Rabbeinu HaKadosh came and got special permission to write Mishnayos. Ramashi came years later, people forgetting, and he wrote down Gemara. But prior to that, nothing was allowed to be written down. And what do you call it? And things which are written, you're not allowed to say by heart. So Rabbi Yechon and Shlakish, they would look into Sefer Haggadah on Shabbos. It was written when it shouldn't be, because Haggadah is Medrashim. Well, because you're not allowed to write it. Because you have no choice. That what if we just write by then, since you had no choice, because people were forgetting everything, so you had to write things down. And we rely on the pasuk. Sometimes to serve Hashem, we have to go defy some of the rules of the Torah, and only Chazal have the right to decide which ones. I'm here too. Comes to have Torah. We don't have a choice, because not every community can afford to have the entire Nevi'im Ksuvim in the scroll. Is same thing here. So that's the basis for what we do today. Now, very interesting. Rabbi Yaakov Emden. Rabbi Yaakov Emden says in his Haggayos on the Gemara, he says as follows, and he lived about 250 years ago, right at the beginning of when Chassidic movement started. He says that Haggadah does not mean what we just translated Medrash, which is how most people learn. Because he says Medrash was permitted to be written down. When we say you're not allowed to write down the oral Torah, it's talking about the halachas of the oral Torah. But Medrashim were always permitted. And so what is it talking about? We're talking about Kabbalah, he says. Kabbalah, they couldn't learn during the week. And Kabbalah, they learned Gemara and Shulchan and other things. When we come to Shabbos, our heads are not in tune for halacha. He said on Shabbos, we are like Kodesh Kedoshim, and we're a step higher than we are during the week. And therefore on Shabbos, they used to sit and learn Haggadah. He says it's Kabbalah. So he's talking about Rabbi Yechon Shlaki. We learn Kabbalah. And on Shabbos, because we're a step higher, more spiritual, we're able to understand and absorb Kabbalah far better than during the week, which is very interesting what he wrote there. Okay. Then he continues. So Bai asked his teacher Rabbi a question. Can you write a Megillah for a child? Can you write, let's say, one parsha in the Chumash, not even a entire Chumash, one parsha to teach in school for kids? I'm going to ask the question now before we go on. We're going to learn there's an argument in Shlokish Rabbi Yechon. How was the Torah transmitted to the Yidden? According to one view, we're going to see that the Rabbi Yechon says the Torah was Megillah Nitna. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote a part, as things happened, he wrote it down. And then in the next thing he wrote down, and then at the end of 40 years, he just stitched them all together. But the Torah was written, it was a very dynamic thing, and it sort of evolved. The Shloki says, no, Torah chasuma nitna. The way Rashi learns, nothing was written till the end of the 40 years, then Moshe Rabbeinu wrote it all down and gave it to us as one piece, as one Sefer Torah. That's how Rashi learns. Says Abaye, my question is, can you take one parsha and just have that on a scroll and learn with that? And what's my shaila? My question is, Lamanda Amar Torah Megillah Nitna, the one who the opinion that said the Torah was written in parts. I have a question, and also I have a question. Lamanda Amar Torah Chasum Nitna, it was given in one go, and he explains now. Lamanda Amar Torah Megillah, you're given in parts. Given the Megillah Gittin was given in parts. Since that's how it originally was written in parts, in sections, so why can't you also, just write as well in sections and teach that to your kids, school kids? Perhaps once Moshe Rabbeinu put all these sections together, it came now one Sefer Torah. Idavik, you're not allowed to break it up. It has to be from an entire Sefer Torah. That's one question. And Tiboy, and my question is also Lamanda Amar Torah Chasum Nitna. According to the opinion, the Torah was given in one go. Do we say Kim the Chasum Nitna in case since it was given in one piece, you cannot divide it? Even since you have to, who can afford the whole Sefer Torah in all these schools? You have no breda. Maybe because of Eis Lasses, you're allowed to write a parsha at a time. Amalei, he told him, "Ain't kaismi." Rabbi said to him, "You don't write." And he asked Rabbi, "Matam, why not?" And Rabbi said, "You know why? Ain't kaismi. You don't have to understand everything. That's just the way it is." And this is Abaye who never takes, just a simple. He doesn't take yes or no. He wants to understand. He's always teasing out of his rebbes whatever he can for Rabbi Yosef. So that's how it is. Israel asks a question. You're telling me that it has to all be written together. That's a question. Yeah. Afi also that Helonia Malka donated a golden plate, a parsha Saita Ksula, and they wrote on this thing the parsha of Ksula, so the Kohanim. If it was a Saita, they would copy from there. They wrote a few psukim, and that was it. You're telling me you cannot even write a parsha. You have to write the entire Sefer Torah, and then they did. So the Gemara, Didn't write the pasuk out. They just wrote it in acronym, just Rosh Tevis. And they looked because they just couldn't remember the order of the words. So they looked at the table, they right away knew. I think I'm not happy because we learned another brayse when they wrote Roya, the Kayin would look at this tabla, this, the golden plate over there. The Kaisa Mashakasa Batabla would write. It sounds like record exactly what's written there. It wasn't just Rosh Tevis. Ema, no, read it as if it says Kimashakasa Batabla, the order that was there in the tabla, but it wasn't full words. I'll ask you for a third brayse. Kishokaisa Roya Batabla. He looks at this tabla. Writes exactly what it says there. Ma'u kosev b'tabla. What's written in the tabla? It says either im shachav, and then it says im loy shachav. Sound like if she committed a sin, so. And if she didn't, now the words exactly are not. It doesn't say the im loy shachav. It says the im loy shatis. But the Gemara is just sort of trying to bring out. It seems from here that the full sentences were written. The first few words of the pasuk was written, and then the rest was Rosh Tevis. And the second half of the pasuk, the first few words are written, and then Rosh Tevis. Says the Gemara, in fact, there's an argument. You don't write a Megillah to a child to learn from there, but if your intention is to complete whatever you started, then you can start learning from it, even though it's incomplete right now, because your intention is eventually to complete it. And Rabbi Yehuda says no. You can write it in sections, but not parshas the way we have it, full stories. You can take the Torah, segment it into full stories or full subjects. So, for example, the Bereshis until Doira Mabel. If you want to write Bereshis, you have to write until the middle of Noach, till Doira Mabel. But Torah is kind of going to write Vayikra ad Vahiba Yom Hashmini. So you go through the Kabbanas, Vayikra and Tzav go together. In other words, you have to write a full subject. If you have a full subject, you can write it down. How was the Torah given to Moshe Rabbeinu in parts? And Shneimar, it says, Oza Marti. Then David Melech said that later on that Moav and Ammon, were treated in a certain way because of the future. Who's the future? David Melech. So he basi b'Megillah Sefer Kosev Alai was written all about me. And what does he refer to the Torah? How does he refer to the Torah? He calls it Megillah. Why is it called a Megillah? Because obviously the Torah was written in Megillah form, in segments. That's Rabbi Yechanan's proof. The Torah was given in one go. And according to Rashi here, Moshe Rabbeinu heard from the Eibush to everything, and he remembered it, he memorized it. He did not record it until the very end. Torah says clearly not so. Torah says, of course, he wrote everything down. But this is how it worked. What do you mean chasum nitna? So Torah says an interesting thing. Torah says, we know that there's certain parts of the Torah are not written in order. For example, even Yisrei. Did Yisrei come before Matan Torah? Because Yisrei starts out with Yisrei coming and joining Moshe, and then we have Matan Torah. According to many opinions, Yisrei came post Matan Torah, but yet it's written in Yisrei before. So it says, so this is what happened. He said that Matan Torah, for example, says Tosis, this is what he's saying, and I'm paraphrasing, was not written down until Yisrei came, and then Moshe Rabbeinu wrote Yisroi coming, and he also wrote Matan Torah. In other words, he didn't write it as it happened. He wrote as where it belongs in the Torah. So if a certain event which will happen later is going to be written in the Torah first, he would not write the event that happened prior to that till the part of the Torah that was meant to be written first. He wrote it down, and then he wrote the part of that happened a few months earlier. So that's what Chasum Nitni is. In other words, the Torah said there's no order in the Torah. According to Tosfos, it was very deliberate. It was ready to be written, and yet Moshe Rabbeinu was held back from writing it because the Eibishter decided that not having an order is an order. That's the order. Not like Rashi learns that everything's like random. It's just random. Tosfos learns no. The order is not to be in order in those places.
And Machlokas is whether the Torah is written chronologically or whether it's written thematically. That's the Machlokas in the Rishonim. Yeah, Rashi holds that it's chronological. Ramban said no, it's thematic. This is
that's in Yisrael, but in other places, in Yisrael works that way. In other places, we have a muktu muchabatera, and we have the Gemara a few times already. And the question is why?
Yeah.
And so anyway, let's continue.
Interesting subject.
Yes, definitely. But with Tosfos is clear, it was deliberate. Because Moshe Rabbeinu held back writing to that other part. So in other words, there had to be a very valid reason. Okay, the Gemara continues. Place. Says the Gemara, And what's the instruction's proof? It says in the pasuk that Moshe Rabbeinu says in the end of his life, take this Sefer Torah. So we see clearly it was one scroll. What Rabbi Yechon do is the of course. He wrote it in segments, but then he stitched it all together and he said, now take it. The Idach Nami Reish Lakish. See, it says Megillah Sefer Kosovo says clearly it's written in segments. He says the Kol HaTorah Kulika Megillah. Sometimes the entire Torah is referred to as Megillah, even though it was not segmented. It was just one Torah, and you call it Megillah. Where do you find that? The Chesiv, because it says in the pasuk, when Zechariah was asked, "What do you see in his dream?" What do you see? And I said, I see Megillah off. I see a Megillah floating above the water. And that Megillah is referring to the Sefer Torah. Inami or Likid Rab Levi. Or we actually follow Rab Levi. And what's Rab Levi? That the Megillah part of the Torah is because there were 8 sections of the Torah that were recorded early on in the first year, because they were relevant to the building of the Mishkan. And Rab Levi says as follows: Shmoina Parshas Nemra B'Yom Shehukah by Mishkan. The big machlek is in the Rishonim how it works. Rashi holds that the first day of Nisan was the 8th day of Yemei HaMiluyim. And that's when all the parties happened. That's when Avia passed away, and so on. Others learn the first day of Nisan began the Shivas Mei HaMiluyim, and the 8th day Miluyim was on the 8th day of Nisan, which makes sense then in the way that it says that we had more Sukkot of there that Nadav Avia passed away at Pesach, and that's why the people came forward and said, "But what do we do about Korban Pesach? Mishol Vel Tzafon, because Nadav Avia was buried at Pesach." But according to Rashi's version, Nadav Avi was buried as Chedesh Nisan. What's the problem? You have plenty of time to the 7 days of the Paraduma. You have plenty of time to get out of the Tumah. But anyway, so 8 parshas were said on that day. Eluhain, these are they. Parshas Kohanim, the Parsha of Kohanim, which is the laws of Kohanim. They have a basic Mikdash now. Parshas Levim, also the laws about Levim, because again they have the Beis Hamikdash now. They have, and the Rashi, they have to sing. They have to know how to behave. And Parshas Tmeim, and Rashi learns Parshas Tmeim is referring to the Pesach Sheni. Vahi Anoshim referring to Pesach Sheni, and because now that we have a Mishkan, and now that the Tmeim are not allowed to come to the Beis Hamikdash, and we couldn't do Paraduma prior because the Paraduma had to be Pesach or Moed, only the Mishkan is up and running. And therefore the Tmeim, now that we're told they were evicted, you're not allowed to be in Machna Shchin and so on, they had to know what to do with Pesach Sheni. Now, the problem is, according to Rashi himself acknowledges, there's a little bit of a problem there, because if this all happened in Chedesh Nisan, what do you ask me about Tezvav Nisan? You have 2 weeks to cleanse yourself. So Rashi says they could have, but they just came and asked, just in case we didn't, what do we do? It takes away the whole thunder, the whole geschmack of these people who came to complain. But Rashi himself acknowledges that. Anyway, Taisha doesn't like that pshat at all because of the reason we just said. Another reason as well. And Taisha says Parshas Tmei is talking about just general rules of Tameh, Sheretz, all those other rules. That, before Yom Tov you have to cleanse yourself. All the rules of Tumah. Okay. Then the Gemara continues. Parsha Shaluach Tmeim, also now that you have a Machna Shchina, a Machna Leviyah, all those rules. Parshas Acharei Mos, the story of what happened with Acharei Mos, and this happened the 8th day. Parshas Shtuya Yain, as a result of Nadav Avihu, the Kohanim were not allowed to drink wine, be intoxicated. Parshas Neiros, about the Menorah, the laws of Menorah, because now the Mishkan is upstanding. Parshas Parah Aduma, the laws of Parah Aduma, because the following day they burnt the parah. You couldn't do the parah aduma while there was no Mishkan. The following day they did the parah aduma, and now they had to know all these rules. Amar Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Elazar says, going forward, a fascinating argument. Torah roiv biksav umiyat apeh. Most of the Torah was actually written down in the Torah, and only a small part of the Torah was given to us orally. Shenamar, because it says in Tanakh, I wrote most of my Torah, and and you guys were like strangers, you didn't really learn it. But so therefore, what do you see from here? That most of my Torah was recorded. Rabbi Yochanan says no. Reiv al peh, most of the Torah is oral. Umiyah biksav, only a little bit biksav. So then it says, Ki al pi hadvarim ha'ela, based on these things, pi is oral, and the pasuk says, Karati, that's when I made my bond with you, my covenant with you. Karati itcha bris. So obviously the bris was made on Torah Shabbat Peh. So that means Torah Shabbat Peh is the most important thing. There's the Gemara. Very fascinating argument. What's the most of the Torah? Which one is it? So everyone agrees that most of the mitzvahs are not written in the Torah, but we use the methods of Yud Midas Shat Torah and Direshes Behem. So the first opinion says that's all considered as if it's written in the Torah, using Zer Shavla, Kal V'Chomer, Hekesh, and all that. It's as if it's written in the Torah, therefore Hashem could say, I wrote most of it. And the other opinion says that no, because it's not really clear in the Torah. In fact, some of the Gzeir Shabbos, we don't even know whether they were just told there's a Gzeir Shabbos, they didn't know what it was, and they had to figure it out. So therefore, that's considered part of the oral Torah. And that's therefore, if that's the case, then most of the majority of the Torah was transmitted to us orally.
We can't understand Torah Shabbat without Torah Shabbat Peh.
Yeah, the question is which is the majority. No, how do we treat the Gzeir Shabbos? Is it so? Sometimes Rashi says Gzeir Shabbos is as if it's written in the Torah itself. So that's what the argument here is.
Okay.
We're using Gzeir Shabbos. Is it that oral part of the Torah, or is that considered the written part of the Torah?
Okay.
Okay, Gemara then continues. What do you do with the psukim? So the Gemara, the idach nami haksiv, it says echtov loy rubai terasi. I will write most of my Torah. So it says clearly that most of the majority of Torah is written. Ahu atmui kametama. Now this is fascinating. The pasuk is not stating a statement; it's asking a rhetorical question. You think I should write most of my Torah? Echtov loy rubai terasi. I should write most of the Torah. Halei k'mayzar nechshavu. That you hardly. You're all like strangers. You don't even learn what I wrote. You want me to write more? So on the contrary, it means that the majority of the Torah is oral. Now, Tosha says here the most fascinating thing. And I have to tell you, I looked at our scroll to see how they would deal with this. And it's a big problem, and they obviously don't talk about it. And I'll just tell you what Tosha says. And I'll explain to you briefly what I'm trying to say. And the art scroll itself just proved why they didn't talk about it. Tosha says, Rashi says the Zohar is talking about the Yidden. The Yidden behave like strangers. They don't learn the Torah. So Hashem says, why should I give them more? They don't even learn what I gave them. Torah says something totally different. Torah says Zohar is referring to Goyim. And Hashem said, I don't want Goyim to know my Torah. I don't want Goyim to know my Torah. So if I put more into Torah Shabbat is translated. If I put more in Torah Shabbat, they'll know my Torah. I'm going to keep very little in Torah Shabbat. I want the majority to be in Torah Shabbat Peh, so that they should not know what's written in my Torah. Okay? Now, what's Tosha saying? Tosha is saying here is that you're not allowed to translate Torah Shabbat Peh in other languages. And based on that, and they tried to print the first Chumash translated into Yiddish, the Noda B'Yehuda put it into Cherem. And so to the Chassam Sofer. He said, because you're not allowed to translate. Now, what's the problem with translating? The Masechta Seifrim, it says that the worst day on our calendar is not Tisha B'Av and is not Asar B'Tevis. The worst day on our calendar is Ches Tevis, Tes Tevis, and Yud Tevis. Says the Masechta Seifrim. What happened? What happened was that's when Talmi brought in the 70 or 71 or 72 elders, and they made the Septuagint. But the Septuagint is 70, but now in some places 72. And they translated the Torah. And they opened the Torah to the world. And the Masechta says it's Kiyom Shenasa Boy Egel. It's no different than the day when the Yidden worship the Egel Hazov. Says the Tur, there's a mitzvah to fast on Ches, Tes, Yud, Tevis. And my Ram brings down also in Shulchan Aruch. And what was the problem? The problem with translation is as follows. Problem number one is the translation is not accurate. A lot of times, certain words you just can't translate it properly. You lose. Number two, more importantly, is there's a kedusha in the words of the Gemara and the words of the Torah, and by you translating it, you take away the whole kedusha. And they give a whole bunch of other reasons. And the Rav Paulin, the Ben Ish Chai, came out against somebody he translated into Arabic. I forgot which sefer it was, and so on. The Zohar, I think it was. Anyway, bottom line. I looked in the art scroll to see how they would deal with it, because the art scroll, Steinsaltz, that's exactly what they did. They translated. As nice as it is, but Tosha says you're not allowed to. So they have nothing on it, zero. But I noticed something, and I'll just show you why translations are not accurate. I have right in front of me. I just looked it up. On 60A, if you have an article, there's 60A, Ha'ara 41. The pasuk says it when we said the different things that the 8 different scrolls that we're talking about. One of them is Tmeim, and Rashi says Tmeim is when the people came to Moshe Rabbeinu on the Erev Pesach. Says, "Oi, anachnu Tmeim nefesh adam." But the people came and they said, "Anachnu Tmeim nefesh adam. We are Tamei. What should we do?" Right? It says in the pasuk, "Hi anoshim." Now, if you look, the translation of Hi anoshim is there were people. How many people? No idea. Maybe 2, 10, 20. According to one opinion, the Gemara was actually 2 Mashal Vel Tzafan. According to others, hundreds, thousands, who knows? People became Tami Meis Mitzvah, or they were carrying the bones of Yeshiv. There's nothing. Even though we have a rule in Halacha, when it's a Rabbi and the Torah doesn't say what it is, it means 2, but that's only when it's negated to Halacha. When it's a story, we don't care how many people it was. See, when you say Anoshim, there were people, it can be any amount. You look in the translation here, in their translation, in 41, it says here, this refers to the passage in the Torah which recounts that 2 men who were Tameh. There's no such thing. Inquired of Moses how they would fulfill the obligation. There's no such thing. That is not an accurate translation. And that's exactly what the Cham Sefer was saying, the problem with translations. But they're not accurate. But anyway, so how come we have this? And it's a good thing. The fact of the matter is, it is a good thing. Is all based on the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov said, he disagreed with Rabbi Yehuda and all those. The Baal Shem Tov said, because we're going to learn in this week's Parashat Dvorim, that Hoyel Moshe Bayer is a Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu explained the Torah in 70 languages. So therefore that tells us that you could translate in other languages. And Moshe Rabbeinu gave us the impetus to translate. The problem with the 70 people was they translated for a goy. They did it for Talmai HaMelech, Talmai. And that was the problem. It wasn't done for Kedusha. It wasn't done for any other purpose other than to satisfy Talmai. But today, all these Sforim that are written in English or in other languages, they're doing it for only one reason, to promulgate Torah around the world. That everyone should be able to learn. Because it's done for Kedusha, then it's actually a good thing. And who gave us the ability to do that? Moshe Rabbeinu. Because he translated Torah in 70 languages, and he put it out there. And that is what Baal Shem Tov's word is. So based on Baal Shem Tov, that's why Archko, Steinsaltz, and all of these other things are wonderful.
Is that why we hold Onkelos in such high esteem? Exactly.
But Onkelos is different. Onkelos got it from Har Sinai, it says. Onkelos, his translation came from Har Sinai. He learned from Yeshua and Rabbi Elazar ben Hurkeles, and so that's a little bit different. Our translation of that Madrega.
I've lost the place, but what page are we on?
Oh, we are on Samach Hamad Beis. I'm not sure exactly.
60.
60B1.
60?
Page 2, Daf, second page.
60B1, is it?
Yeah. Okay, let's continue. Says the Gemara, Darash Rabbi Yehuda bar Nachmani. We're up to Darash Rabbi Yehuda. Sorry, I missed the line.
No, you're fine.
No, you're line here. It says Kapi Advarim Me'ela. It says clearly Api Hadvarim Me'ela. It sounds like that the Eibush made a pact with us only on the oral part of the Torah. Doesn't that tell us the oral part of the Torah is the majority of the Torah? Says you want to know. Ahu Mishum the Kifil and Migri. It's harder to learn, and therefore he made the pact. And that not because it's in quantity, but I guess the quality. It's not the kamus, it's the eichus. It's much harder to learn, so he made the pact based on that. So talking about the oral part of the Torah, we have another interesting halacha. Because see, one pasuk says, write these things. And then it says, so one part is like, should write these things. And then it says, that this should remain oral. So what should it be, written or oral? Okay, so how does it work? That which is given to us written, now let's say it by heart. And that which is said by heart, I'll write it down. That's why Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi had to have a special, permission to write down and so on. Now, there's a big shaila in halacha in chapter 49 in Shulchan talks about in the poskim. So how do we say Shema by heart, for example? How do we say, Ashrei by heart? These are parts of Torah Shebiksav, Tanakh. So there are a few answers. One answer is if you're saying it by heart because you got used to it, not you went out of your way deliberately to learn it. You just got used to it, you can say it by heart. So Shema you say every day, and Ashrei and all of these things, so it's not a problem. Others say it's only a problem when you're saying it to be Yaitza somebody else. But if you're not saying it to be Yaitza anybody else, then you can say it by heart as well, because you know that many people have a tradition to learn Parshas Azina by heart. It's supposed to be a zgula for wonderful things, for wealth, for health, and all these things. But you're learning Mamish Torah Shabbat by heart. And they say because you're not out to be Mitzi anybody else, therefore you're permitted.
It's not because we treat it as part of tefillah.
Yeah, but you know, even tefillah doesn't help. You still, if it's Torah Shabbat, you can't say by heart. In fact, there's a whole machlek in the poskim. You're probably not familiar with this. Whether you're allowed to use a siddur, because part of the siddur is Torah Shabbat Peh. Shmoneh is Torah Shabbat Peh, not Torah Shabbat. So how can you read it from a siddur? And who gave the permission? And it's a big argument. What's better, to use a siddur or not to use a siddur? Because there are parts of davening which is Torah Shabbat, and there are parts of davening which is Torah Shabbat Peh. What are you supposed to do? The Shalom HaKadosh has a whole thing on it. Very interesting. Anyway,
doing it from an iPhone is not a problem at all now.
That's a good point. What is the status of an iPhone?
I can't use a phone for davening.
But you see more and more becoming ubiquitous. Okay. He learned the same idea but from different words. It says in the pasuk there, these. Only this you permit right. We have to kaisim halach. You know, all right, halachas. In other words, the oral Torah should be written oral. They did write privately. Sometimes they would write an opinion or something and kept it to themselves. But that was it, only to remember it, not to disseminate it. The Eibishter gave us the covenant based on the oral part of Torah. The next part of the Mishnah was that ma'arvin, if you make an erev chatzeres and you put a piece, you put the food into one place, you should use the same place that you always use. Ma'arvin bebayis yashim pnei for peaceful reasons. My time, what's the reason? Elaim we should covered. Is it to give cover because so many years you had it in this house and continue? Bahushipura, it was the shofar. The having mekara beid Rabbi Yehuda. There was the shofar. In other words, on Friday we learned in Yerushalayim they used to blow 6 times. Morning Shabbos in the second parak, and so on. And it seems clearly from here that they did it outside of Israel as well. You go around the world today in a lot of Jewish cities, they have these alarms that come off, 15 minutes before candle lighting, 10 minutes, they give you this heads up. They have 3 alarms. So this is the shofar. They used to have a shofar in Bavel to blow before Shabbos. So first it stayed in the house of Rabbi Yehuda. Then Rabbi Yehuda no longer is yeshiva. Rabbi took over, went to Rabbi's house, and there's no such thing as covered. Then went to Rabbi Yisrael's house. Rabbi Yisrael succeeded Rabbi. Then Abaya succeeded Rabbi Yisrael. He became Rosh Yeshiva. Rabbi succeeded Abaya, and so on. It moved around. So it can't be because of covered, because nobody. So the reason because of chshada. The chshada, people think that we used to leave the Erev in this guy's house. Why no longer we leave it in his house? Maybe because they used to. Maybe people will be choshed that why don't we see it in the house? Because they forgot to make an Erev this week. Because everybody's used to seeing the Erev in that person's house. That's why we are worried and we don't have it. Traces learns that shofar means actually a tzedakah pushka. Rashi's second shot, a tzedakah pushka, for they collect money funds for the school, for the yeshiva, and therefore they used to leave it in Rosh Yeshiva's house, and that's why it wasn't a problem, because they knew that the Rosh Yeshiva is the one who's going to collect it. And Traces brings, when it says chshada ba'erev, we're scared. The reason why we stopped leaving in this guy's house is he used to eat up the challah every Motzei Shabbos, or the matzah, and we don't trust him anymore. Okay, then the Gemara continues. These are all things because of shalom, because of trying to engender peace and be cognizant of how other people see things. The boyishu karav lama. So then we learned about an interesting thing. We have, let's say, this river or this canal, and you have fields that are higher up and fields that are lower up. So the pit that's closer to the river have water entitlements. Itma we learned, and this is in Australia, we have all the time. We have the case here where you have water in South Wales and Victoria and South Australia. They're all fighting for water rights. Who's more entitled? Those who are closer to the source, or those who are the furthest from the source? Let water go its natural way, and then wherever it ends, that's who should get the water. The Gemara says, "Itma we actually have machlekes b'nei nara." The Rabba, the people on the end should get the water. Maya Beresh. Well, Maya Maya Beresh. No, the ones on top, near the source. And the Gemara says very interesting. Bid the Mezla, the water flows naturally on its own. Kuliyamale Pligi, there's no argument. The ones on the bottom are the ones who have the first right, because you have to let water take its course. That everyone along the way can take as much water as they want. Because the water is just flowing and it's free, it's ownerless. Everybody can take water whatever they want. What's the argument here about doing an activity to siphon water off? And that's the argument here. Keep misker the ashkuye. They're arguing a case here that, for example, that there's not enough water for everybody, so you start digging, irrigations or full canals to siphon off water to come to you and put it into some kind of little dam or something, so you have your own water source. And as a result of that, there'll be less water flowing down to the next farms below. And so the question is, who has the right to do that? Keep playing misker, digging hole and filling it up with water. Shmuel Amar Eloi Shasamai. The ones on top have the first right; they're closer to the source. The Amar Nama could be in trade, we're closer. But Rava Matatoi Shasamai. The ones on the bottom. The Amni, they say Nara Keposhta Lezel. They say that the water, the people on the bottom say, let the water go the way it goes, and we're at the bottom, and we're at the end of the water, so we have the first rights. If they're digging dams to collect the water. Says water, but doesn't say clearly on Mishnah Nan, Boyin HaKodev La'ama Mismal Elishin, if they dark Yishom. It says clearly here that the pits on top have the first right because of dark Yishalom. Maybe not according to halacha, but to be mentioned, they're closer up to the source. Now, so it's a question on Rav who says it's the bottom. So the Gemara says, and this brings out the truth of learning. If you have an argument with somebody and you have proof that you're right, then you just walk away. I won the argument. Here there's an argument with Rav Shmuel, and they ask a very strong question of Rav, and Shmuel advocates on behalf of Rav. Shmuel, Targum of Shmuel, a liba de Rav. Shmuel is going to answer now on behalf of Rav. We're talking about over here, in our Mishnah, talking about the water naturally flows over your pit. You're not digging up any new pits. Your pit is right next to water and naturally goes there. You don't have to do anything to stop it. You didn't do anything to make it happen. Therefore, you don't have to do anything to stop it. And the water, your pit was there first before this river started to flow there. Then the Mishnah says, by right, you're there, you're allowed to. We're talking about Rav Shmuel. We're arguing where you went ahead, you dug a dam. And the question is, who has first rights? So, what's it then talk about? If your pit was there first and then the water came along, of course you have first rights. I would have thought that Motzi Amla, the people at the bottom, could take you to a court, to a dintayda, and argue, you should close up your pit. True, your pit was there first, but you're harming everybody else. Close up your pit so that the water shouldn't fill your pit, and therefore let the water continue flowing its natural course. That's what we would have thought. No. Now we don't know the halacha is like. Called the alim gava. Whoever stronger wins. Even though generally speaking, the halacha is like Shmuel when it comes to matters of commercial law. So Rashi says he doesn't agree with that halacha. Others say he does agree with the halacha, but because Shmuel advocated on behalf of Rav, maybe now we're having doubts whether Shmuel still maintains his opinion or maybe he now accedes to Rav. That's why we don't know the halacha. Called the alim gava. Whoever stronger wins. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster, a machlekes, but that's what the Gemara says. Rav Shimi is actually an argument of Shani. Whenever we use the rule of called the alim gava, what's the idea? His idea that Bezin says we don't know what to do. We're walking away, or is the idea that whoever is going to whoever feels that they're more in the right are going to work much harder and relentlessly to obtain their desired result, and therefore the halacha will play itself out, and the right thing will happen. But in this case here, it's hard to see how that fits in. That's the opinion of Tosfos and Babasa, but it's hard to see how it fits in because here they're not arguing. Nobody's arguing about the facts. They're arguing about who has rights. So how does Kol Da'al Gova going to tell us who has rights? That same Kol Da'al Gova is talking about two people fighting about a boat. Each one says it's theirs. Neither of them have proof that it's theirs. What do we do? So Ben says, you know what? Kol Da'al Gova, fight it out. And obviously the person who really owns this boat, each is going to fight harder and end up with that person. But in this case here, it's hard to see how Kol Al Govar, because we're arguing that legally who has more rights. How is that going to prove itself by Kol Al Govar? Anyway, Rav Simi Bar Ashi also the Kamid Abaye. By the way, whenever you see in Shas Simi Bar Ashi, it's not Rav Ashi's son. Rav Ashi, who was the last generation of Aroyim, this is not his son at all. Rav Simi Bar Ashi, according to some, was his father, according to some opinions. Others say he was a student of Rav, and he was Rav Ashi's Rebbe. The big argument that we're going to have in the Kedusha is a big argument. The Rambam and Rashi and everybody's all mixed up. A lot of the names in Shas, we don't really know when they lived, because like Rav Ashi, the Gemara says there, when Rava passed away, Rav Ashi was born, and that's how Rashi learns. Rav Ashi. So if you ever find the Gemara according to Rashi that Rav Ashi spoke to Rava, it's impossible. He was born the day that he passed away, and Rav Sim Rashi, if it was Rav Ashi's son, it's impossible that he's talking to Abaya. Abaya died before Rava. We just learned that Rava became Rosh Hashiva after Abaya. So therefore, Rav Sim Rashi was somebody else. He was either not related to Rashi at all, or he was, but he was his father, and so on.
The main source for our knowledge of all of these Tanoim and Amoraim is through the Ageres of Rav Shira Gaon.
Yeah, but it's a big argument. The Rambam argues if you're going in many places. The Rambam clearly learned that Rav Ashi was born before Rava passed away, because the Rambam, when he counts the Shalshelis, he says it went from Rabbi Yosef to Abai Rava, and from Abai Rava went to Rav Ashi. So clearly, Rav Ashi learned from Abai Rava, which he did. But according to Rashi, it's impossible. There had to be someone in between.
Yeah.
And and we have a Gemara in Tainus that Rav Simi Barashi was so special that Rav Papa was scared of him. He went to learn by Rav Papa. Rav Papa was scared of him because he was too smart. So obviously it's somebody else. It's not Rav Ashi's son. Anyway, Rav Simi Barashi came, very interesting Gemara now. Rav Simi Barashi came also the Kalva, came to Abai. Now, if we wanted a paradigm of somebody who sits and learns Yom of Alayla, you wouldn't find anybody else but Abai and Rava. Because every couple of pages, there's no 3 pages in the Shas without Abai and Rava there. So they're always learning, right? So Rav Simi Rashi said to Abaya, teach me. Amalei loisum marbi, to find the time, I want to have a share with you. Amalei, Abaya said to him, Easily eating a little, I have time, but I only use it for myself. During the day, I'm busy learning. So Rav Simi Rashi said, Veloisum marbalayla, give me a share at night. Amalei Easily mailash, at night I'm a farmer. I need to irrigate my fields. But this is the Abaya. So Abaya, you would think Abaya was in a koil, it was Rosh Koil, he sat and he learned. We learned before he was Rosh Hashiva. He was, for his parnasa, he was a farmer. And he had time to learn all day to become the famous Abaya. Amalei, so Simon said, you know what? I have a proposal. I will put the water during the day. I'll irrigate your field. We'll sit down together and learn at night. I'm asking, Abaya said. Also, Simon Rashi is very smart and very shrewd. So Abaya was right in the middle. The river was on top, the river was on the bottom, Abaya was in the middle. Because he's in the middle, neither Rav nor Shmuel says he has any rights. He definitely couldn't dig any pits. It's either the people at the source or the people at the very end where the water ends. But in the middle, you can't. All you can do is take buckets and take water out, but you can't build pits to siphon off the water. So what he did was very smart. He went to the people on top, and normally he said to them, this is Rav Simi Rashi, Tato Shasamai, the halach is that the ones on the bottom have the rights to drink the water. So leave it alone, don't touch it. Badesha, or close up your pits. Then he went to the guys at the bottom, and he told them, the halach is that the guys at the top, the source, they're the ones who have a right. So he stopped both ends from taking water, and if the water was now in the river was flowing very nicely. He went and dug his own hole and took all the water away from the river, and he filled up a dam for Abaya. And what was his logic? Because Kol Da'al Gava means whoever is stronger. So there's no rule. No rule. I can do it also. The comment begins Abaya, what are you outsmart? You think you're so cunning? You follow the two. It's either Rav or Shmuel. It can't be both. The entire year, he didn't want to have any benefit at all from the fruits that grew on his property from that water. And because Abaya said that, so Rav Huna says, "Called Alan Govar." I can do whatever I want. However, Abaya says you couldn't do that because called Alan Govar means you have to follow one halacha. You can't follow neither halacha. You can't use both halachas to your benefit when you're not either one. You don't fit into either one.
Probably
Anyway.
thought it was Geneva of some sort.
He outsmarted them. Too smart for his own good. Hanu b'nei bei Charmach, the people of the city of Charmach. The Oslo, they went, Korobadesha, the Shanvasa, they went ahead and dug a pit at the very beginning of this river known as Shanvasa. Bahadrua, Bishaduya, Bishili, Nara. What they did was, there's no picture in the Gemara, but what they did was, it was a river. They siphoned the river, they diverted the river to go, let's say, to the right or to the left, around, completely snake around their field, or right through the middle of the field, and then they brought it back to the river. So what happened? They made a sharp turn. The river was flowing. They made a sharp turn, and the water now they barricaded sort of the water shouldn't flow straight down, and diverted it to go right through their property to irrigate their fields. So what happened was, in this case here, so this is similar to the argument before. The guys on top have the right, the guys on the bottom. But what happened here was, also the people from the top came to Abaye, and their complaint was not that you're stealing all the water. Their complaint was that because you diverted the water so suddenly, the water now can't flow straight. So it's building up, it builds up, and it's flooding our fields. What you did was you're causing us harm. So Abaye said to them, you know what you should do? Dig the river, make it deeper, and the river is deeper, so then it sort of slows down the flow a bit, and it won't therefore build up where it gets diverted. If you do that, the river doesn't have that much water. If we dig it much deeper, then the water level will lower, and then we won't benefit anymore from the water coming to our garden, to our fields over there, because the water level will be lower. He said, Zilu slikun avshaychem asam. He said, so leave. Big machlek. Who was he talking to? Who should leave? Who should leave? So Rashi says, he said to the people of Karmach, that too bad. You don't like it, leave. Others say, sorry, he tells the people of Karmach, you cannot divert the water. Rashi says you cannot divert the water, you got to let it go and flow the normal way. But Rabbi Hananel says he's telling the people who came to complain. He says you can't stop them because the rule is called the Alam Davar, and therefore they can, whoever wins wins. They're stronger. They won. Anyway, let's continue on. The next thing we learned in the Mishnah was for Darkei Shalom. They said that if somebody has a net and catching fish, trapping animals, you're not allowed to take it away from them, even if they were not kohen. Says the Gemara, we're talking about we're talking about these. We're talking about if you have a net that sort of, let's say, an animal that a net falls down on all sides, then or a net that sort of traps the animal and covers it completely around. That's like chatzah. You're kind of with your kelim, it's like a keli. So, but if you have these kind of nets that sort of wrap around whatever you caught the fish or the animals, it becomes yours, the fisherman or the trapper, because you were kind of the animal. There's a string across, with a few needles sticking out, or let's say a fishing rod. Over here, you weren't kind of with your keli because whatever you trapped is not really sitting inside the keli. But Darkei Shalom, be a mensch. Don't take it. So the Rabbanan said you're not allowed to take it, even though it wasn't really kind. It says the Gemara, the same thing we had an argument. If a child or a chedesh or a sheita find something, they don't really have a kinyan, but Darkei Shalom, they found it, let them have it. And Rabbi Yossi says gezel gomer. Rabbi Yossi says it's mamish stealing with the Rabbanan. Now the Gemara is going to ask in a minute, what's the difference if you say it's Darkei Shalom or gezel gomer? They're both with the Rabbanan. So the Mainaf Kamina, what's the difference? Can you go to court and say, I want it back? If it's Darkei Shalom, you're not a mensch, but you can't go to a court and retrieve it from you. But if it's Gezel Gomer with the Rabbanan, then they can go to court and take it back. If it's a poor man standing on top of the olive tree and banging down, and little olives fall to the ground, whatever is there, you're not allowed to take it because of Darkei Shalom. He wasn't koined, but Darkei Shalom. Or even if he, let's say, picked it. So when he picked it, he took it in his hand, but he had no intention to be koined. There's a big argument. We know that a hand is like your chatzah. When it comes to a chatzah, we learned it doesn't matter whether you're aware if a ball falls inside a hefka in your property, it doesn't matter whether you're aware, you're not aware, the din is your koined. When it comes to your hand, there's a big machlekes, because your hand, you could be aware, you should be aware, it's in your hand. The machlek is whether your hand is like a chatzah, we don't need you to be aware, or a hand, you should be aware in order for it to be considered your hand or like a chatzah. So even the poor man picked the things, he had no intention whatsoever to be kained, so therefore he's not kained, but Darkei Shalom, leave it on the ground for the poor man. But he actually picked it up and lifted it, then he is kind of, and it's gezel gum. Says the Gemara, Rav Kahana, how the cause of the hutzel of Kahana was came to hutzel chaz. You saw a person that I showed you before. You saw a person throwing up sticks, hitting the standing on the ground, throwing up sticks, and these things were falling down. The dates were falling down, or because last time the dates were falling down, and they're falling down. Also, came along Rav Kahana and started to pick it up and eat it. Because Amalei said to him, didn't you say I also before picked things up with my hand? I lifted it and then I threw it down. So in other words, it's not just I knew exactly what I was doing. I picked it up. So I was kind of, and you're taking all these dates. You must come from the region of Rabbi Yoshi's Rav. He said, Rabbi Yoshi was a wonderful teacher, taught everybody the halachas. Now, what exactly was Rav Kahana thinking? Rav Kahana thought the way according to Tosfos that this guy, he was throwing up pieces of wood and branches were falling down. So he thought the guy wanted the branches, not the dates. And that's why he thought you can keep the dates. So the guy said to him, but no, I already picked dates before and therefore you're eating my dates. We'll go to the Mishnah. If goyim, poor people come and take electric repair, don't stop them because of dark yishol. There's a concept called Ava. You have to be peaceful with them and therefore you let them go. Tell them what we learned. He says, I want that to give tzedakah, you should give tzedakah to the poor goyim together with the poor yidden. Now, again, because of dark yishol. You also go to goyim as well as to yidden. The koivlin, and we bury meisei nachem in meisei Yisrael, we pay dark yishol. Big machlek Rishonim. Rashi says over here, you bury meisei nachem with meisei Yisrael. Not that you put them in the Jewish graveyard, but cemetery, but rather he says, if you found strewn bodies, Eden and Goyim mixed together, bury them both. So for Rashi, the only time you have to bury Goyim is if they're all together. So you follow Rashi when it comes to tzedakah. If there are Jewish people lining up to get tzedakah and going with them, you have to give them. But if Goyim come on their own, maybe you could tell them you don't have money right now, you're tight. You're not mechuyev to give them. And the same thing, big from the same place you have Yiddish and Goyim, and you go to the Yidden, you show them walk into the Goyim But if just a Goyish place, there's no Inyan. That's Rashi. Tosfos totally disagrees. Others totally disagree, and they hold that there's the Ran disagrees, and others that you have to go, even if there's no Eden around, you have to bury the Goyim because you have to be a mensch. You live in a society, you have to make sure there's no Ava, there's no antipathy towards Eden, and therefore you have to give tzedakah to Goyish causes as well. It doesn't have to be the same measure as Eden, but give them something, a token, so that they should feel that we are sensitive to their needs as well. Same thing with Bikkur. We'll stop here, and in 30 seconds we'll start the next half where we want to stay on. Otherwise, a good